Here's the podcast script. Rats, leaks, and broken elevators, that's the headline from the New York Times, and it tells you almost everything you need to know about what's happening inside America's federal buildings right now. Here's the situation. Across the United States, federal employees are going to work every day in buildings that are crumbling around them. We're talking about roofs that leak so badly that IRS workers in Atlanta are using hoses and plastic bags to manage the water coming in. We're talking about mold so severe in a Veterans Affairs office in Hilo, Hawaii, that visitors were complaining and one employee was eventually told not to work near it. And in Oakland, California, there's a federal building where on any given day, someone is at real risk of getting trapped in an elevator. This isn't a new problem, it's been building for decades. An oversight board recently estimated the total backlog of deferred maintenance across federal buildings at somewhere around $50 billion. To put that in perspective, the Public Buildings Reform Board warned earlier this year that within a few years, that repair bill will actually exceed the entire value of the federal government's real estate portfolio. The government will owe more to fix its buildings than the buildings themselves are worth. The General Services Administration, the GSA, acts as the landlord for civilian federal agencies. It owns roughly 1,475 buildings across all 50 states and U.S. territories. The average building is 50 years old. And those repair needs span everything from roof replacements and asbestos removal to electrical upgrades and broken HVAC systems. So why hasn't this been fixed? The answer is largely bureaucratic. Under federal law, any major improvement to a GSA building costing more than $3.96 million requires congressional approval. That might sound like a reasonable safeguard, but consider this: $3.96 million covers the cost of replacing just 3 elevators. The government needs to replace dozens. And the approval process takes an average of 435 days and often longer. By the time money is approved, costs have exploded. The Kennedy Federal Building in Boston is a perfect example. A project to replace the roof, fix the HVAC system, and update the electrical was first presented to Congress back in 2016. Since then, the cost has ballooned by more than 400%. And while Congress has been sitting on it, the building has developed new problems. Its elevators, which are more than 30 years old, have now trapped people at least 49 times in just the past 2 years. In March, the GSA's head, Edward Forst, told Congress directly, "This isn't just an accounting exercise. This represents real buildings deteriorating and real safety hazards developing when we do not address problems when they arise." In May, Forst and leaders of 21 federal agencies went further, formally asking congressional leadership to overhaul the process, specifically, to raise the spending threshold from $3.96 million to $75 million, which would let the GSA act faster without waiting in line for approval. So far, Congress hasn't budged. And according to Dan Matthews, a former GSA real estate official who now sits on the reform board, it probably won't. Spending money on government buildings, he said, just doesn't rank high enough for lawmakers on either side of the aisle. In his words, it doesn't fall that high, and it never will. The pandemic made everything worse. When federal offices sat empty for years, water went stagnant in pipes, mold spread, HVAC filters went unchanged. When employees came back starting in 2022, they walked into buildings that had deteriorated even further. Last year, the Trump administration ordered all federal workers to return to the office full-time, which pushed more people back into buildings whose problems had never been addressed. Some of those problems are serious health risks. The FDA's headquarters tested positive for Legionella, the bacteria behind Legionnaire's disease, a dangerous form of pneumonia. An FDA spokeswoman said the most recent test in May came back negative. But a federal building in Louisville, Kentucky, the Mazzoli Federal Building, has had ongoing Legionella problems in its water supply, with lab tests finding the bacteria in fountains and sinks in both 2024 and 2025. According to a worker there, signs still hang around the building today warning that Legionella has been detected in the drinking water. The people affected aren't only federal employees. These are buildings where ordinary Americans go to access veterans' benefits, Social Security services, and more. The story here is simple: even if the politics aren't, $50 billion in deferred maintenance, a bureaucratic approval process that takes over a year, and a Congress with little appetite to change either, while the buildings keep getting worse. This has been your briefing on a slow-moving infrastructure crisis hiding in plain sight, inside the very buildings where the government does its work. Word count is approximately 780 words, which reads to roughly 4 to 5 minutes at a natural spoken pace.